If you are not walking the divine path, if you are only curious, if you are here for entertainment, I tell you plainly and without apology, this message is not for you. Only God's true chosen ones should remain here. Only those who feel the weight of spiritual calling, the ache of purpose, and the quiet burden of divine assignment are meant to hear this. And if you are still listening, then chosen one, this reached you at the exact moment heaven intended. Not early, not late, right on time. I am speaking directly to you now. Yes, you, the one who has been pouring into others, lifting them, covering them, guiding them, only to feel forgotten. This message carries answers that will shift the way you see your past, your pain, and your position. And I promise you, if you stay until the end, you will not leave the same way you arrived. Before we go deeper, I want you to respond in the comments with just one number that resonates with your spirit right now. Either 777 or 444. Only one. Let it be your silent confirmation that this message is for you. Also, chosen one, subscribe to this channel, tap the bell so you don't miss what heaven releases here, and share this message with someone who is quietly walking this same road in silence. Now steady yourself, open your spirit, because what you are about to hear will explain everything.
The painful paradox, how the ones you built were the first to forget you. Chosen one, there is a certain kind of pain that does not come from enemies, strangers, or the outside world. It comes from the very people you lifted up with your own hands, the ones you supported when they had nothing, the ones you covered when they were weak, the ones you believed in when no one else saw their worth. And now, somehow, they walk past you as if you were never part of their story. That wound cuts deep, not because of pride, but because of truth. You know what you gave. You remember the nights you stayed awake for them. You remember the prayers, the sacrifices, the advice, the protection. And yet, now you feel invisible to the very ones who once leaned on you to stand. This is the paradox of the chosen. You are designed to build, but not always to be remembered by what you build. You are assigned to plant, but not always to stay and watch the harvest. And that feels unfair to the human heart. You ask yourself in silence, how could they forget me so easily after everything? But heaven answers differently than the world. Heaven never promised that those you elevate will carry your name. Heaven only promised that your obedience would carry eternal weight. Understand this clearly. Most people receive help emotionally. The chosen give help spiritually. And when you lift someone spiritually, you are touching the core of their becoming. You change what they believe about themselves. You unlock doors they never knew existed. And once they begin to walk through new doors, they often associate their new life with their own strength, not with the hands that helped them rise. This is not always arrogance. Sometimes it is survival. Sometimes it is immaturity. Sometimes it is fear of looking back at who they used to be. Looking back at you reminds them of who they were before transformation, and many people cannot emotionally survive that reflection. So they avoid it. They avoid you. You must also understand that many people love you for what you provide, not for who you are. They loved your wisdom when they were confused. They loved your strength when they were broken. They loved your compassion when they were empty. But once they became full again, they mistook the fullness for independence. They forgot the source of the flow, and when people forget the source, they unconsciously disconnect from it. This is not always conscious betrayal, it is often spiritual blindness. There is another truth you must face without bitterness. Not everyone you raise was meant to stay at your table. Some were only meant to pass through your hands. You were not assigned to keep them. You were assigned to prepare them. This is where many chosen suffer unnecessarily. You confuse assignment with attachment. You think because you poured into them, they were meant to remain connected to you forever. But divine assignment does not work like emotional possession. God moves people like seasons. Some stay for winter, some for spring. Very few remain for every season of your life. Another painful layer of this paradox is that the higher someone rises, the more uncomfortable they feel acknowledging who supported them at lower levels. Gratitude requires humility, and elevation without inner healing often produces pride without mercy. When someone rises without resolving insecurity, they begin to rewrite their own story in their mind. They remove the version of themselves that needed help. They remove the people who saw their weakness. They remove you, not because you harmed them, but because you remind them that they were once small. Chosen one, hear this with clarity. You did not imagine the shift. You did not suddenly become unlovable. You did not lose your value overnight. What changed is that your role in their journey ended. And when a role ends, silence often follows. The pain comes because you loved beyond role. You cared beyond assignment. You invested beyond outcome. That is both your glory and your burden. You also must understand that builders are rarely celebrated by those who live inside the buildings they constructed. Once the house stands, no one thinks about the architect every morning. They enjoy the shelter but forget the blueprint. They admire the comfort but overlook the sacrifice. That does not mean the builder failed. It means the building worked. There is also the spiritual law of transfer. When God moves someone from dependence to independence, He often removes the visible support so the person learns to rely on their own relationship with Him. And when God removes the visible support, that support often feels forgotten. That support is you. You did nothing wrong. God simply shifted the structure of their growth. Many chosen struggle because they secretly expected loyalty in return for sacrifice. That expectation is human, it is not sinful, but it is dangerous when attached to divine assignment. Because divine assignment does not guarantee emotional reward, it guarantees spiritual impact, and impact is often invisible in the moment. You must also recognize that some people walk away not because they stopped needing you, but because your presence convicts them. Every time they see you, they remember the standard you lived by, the integrity you modeled, the patience you carried, the discipline you walked in. And when their current lifestyle does not align with that standard, your presence becomes uncomfortable. So they choose distance instead of repentance. They choose forgetting instead of reflection. This is why you often get abandoned right when others stabilize. When they finally feel strong enough to stand on their own, they associate needing you with weakness. And because they no longer want to feel weak, they detach from the reminder of the season they were weak in. That reminder is you. Let me speak this plainly to you. You were never meant to be the destination in their life. You were the bridge. And bridges are not celebrated by those who cross them. They are used, crossed, and left behind. Yet without the bridge, the crossing would have been impossible. This paradox hurts because your heart is not wired like the world. You remember. You honor, you reflect, you carry gratitude. You would never forget the ones who lifted you, and because you love deeply, you expect deeply. But not everyone carries your depth. Not everyone carries your memory capacity. Not everyone has your spiritual awareness. You must stop measuring their forgetting as proof of your failure. It is often proof that your assignment worked. They moved, they grew, they stabilized. And once the miracle moved into maintenance, they no longer felt the urgency of acknowledging the miracle worker God sent through you. You also must understand that when God is preparing to elevate you to a higher level, He strips away emotional dependencies. Sometimes He allows people to forget you so that you stop building your identity on being needed. Because the next level of your calling is not about being needed, it is about being assigned. This is why this pain feels confusing. It is not rejection in the traditional sense. It is repositioning disguised as abandonment. It is divine transition wearing human disappointment. And, chosen one, the ones who forget you are not always your enemies. Many are simply unfinished souls who have not yet learned how to honor the hands that helped them rise. Their story is still being written. Yours is being rewritten. You built them. You did your part. You fulfilled that chapter. You are not forgotten in heaven, even if you feel forgotten on earth. And that truth will become clearer as we go deeper. Why God allows separation after elevation. Chosen one, this is where many get confused. You think separation means failure, loss, rejection, or punishment. But in the realm of the spirit, separation after elevation is often confirmation, not correction. God does not separate you from people because something went wrong. He separates you because something went right. Elevation always demands distance. Growth always demands a new environment. And destiny always demands a release. When God lifts someone, He must also loosen the old ties that would pull them back down. And sometimes you are one of those old ties, not because you are wrong, but because your role in their lower season is complete. You were grace in the storm. You were stability in the chaos. You were instruction in the confusion. But once the storm passes, once stability forms, once clarity arrives, God transitions the support system, not to dishonor the past, but to protect the future. You see, elevation changes the way a person sees everything, including the hands that helped lift them. When God elevates someone, He begins to teach them reliance on Him alone. And for that lesson to take root, visible supports often fade. The separation is not always about you. It is about God removing intermediaries so that the person learns to hear Him directly. There is also protection in this distance, protection for you. If people stayed too long after elevation, they might misuse your access. They might begin to treat your wisdom casually. They might pull from you without honor. They might drain instead of grow. And God will not allow the chosen to become a permanent spiritual resource for people who no longer respect the source. So He creates space, quietly, firmly, without explanation. Another truth is this: elevation produces exposure. When someone rises, their character is tested in a new way, and God knows that not everyone will pass that test with humility. Some will pass with gratitude, some will pass with pride. If God kept everyone connected after elevation, the fallout would be unbearable. So He separates early to soften what would later break violently. Distance reduces destruction. You must also understand that separation is how God prevents identity theft. The chosen pour identity into others. You speak life, you speak vision, you speak confidence, you speak destiny. And when someone rises carrying your voice, if they remain too close for too long, they may begin to replace God's voice with yours. That is dangerous for both of you. So God separates to restore divine order. God also separates because people grow at different speeds. Elevation rarely happens at the same pace for everyone, and when one rises faster than another, friction forms, envy forms, comparison forms, misalignment forms. So instead of allowing silent resentment to poison relationships, God creates distance, not as punishment, but as preservation. There is also the law of spiritual transition. Every major shift comes with relational loss. Abraham had to leave his father's house. Moses had to leave the palace. Joseph had to leave his family. David had to leave the fields. Jesus had to leave the crowd. If God never separated His chosen from familiar faces, destiny would remain trapped in comfort. Chosen one, separation after elevation is also how God breaks emotional dependency. Many of you became needed too deeply by those you helped. They leaned on you instead of learning to stand. They depended on your strength instead of developing their own. And God will never allow dependency to replace responsibility. So He allows distance to force maturity. Some of you feel confused because the separation came with no explanation, no argument, no closure, no final conversation, just silence. That is often how God works when explanation would only create delay. If He explained everything, you might try to fix it emotionally instead of accepting it spiritually. If he allowed long conversations, you might negotiate your way back into assignments he already closed. So he allows silence to be the severing. Another truth you must face is that not everyone can follow you into your next level. Some cannot survive the altitude of where God is taking you. Some would become liabilities, some would become distractions, some would become weights, and God never lifts the chosen while allowing unnecessary weight to remain attached. Elevation also changes your authority. When you were building others, your authority was hidden inside service. But when God begins to elevate you, your authority becomes visible. And not everyone who once received from you can handle your visible authority. Some only liked you when you were pouring. They struggle with you when you are positioned. So God separates them to protect your authority from familiarity. Let me say this plainly. God does not allow separation to break your heart. He allows it to break your limits. Some of the people who left could never have handled who you are becoming. They would have pulled on old versions of you that God already buried. They would have expected the same access they once had, even though you have changed. Distance prevents dishonor. You must also understand that when God prepares to send new people, he must first clear space. New wine cannot be poured into crowded vessels. New assignments cannot land in cluttered emotional rooms. Before God sends fresh connections, he often removes old ones. Not because the old ones were evil, but because the room must be emptied for what is coming. Separation is also God's way of teaching you that you are not defined by who stays. You are defined by who sent you. If your identity depends on loyalty from others, then your foundation is too fragile for what God is about to entrust to you. So God allows people to forget you so that you remember who you truly belong to. There is a deeper layer too. Some people leave because they secretly believe they no longer need God after elevation. And once they turn inward in pride, they must also turn away from the ones who reminded them of their dependence. That is not your responsibility. That is their spiritual choice. You cannot carry their accountability. Chosen one. Not every separation is the devil. Some separations are assignments fulfilled. Some goodbyes are confirmations. Some endings are approvals. God allowed them to go because if they stayed, either they would have stagnated or you would have shrunk. And God refuses to build future glory on the foundation of comfort. This is why separation hurts, but also frees you. It hurts because your heart is real. It frees you because your calling is bigger than your feelings. God does not ask the chosen to be numb. He asks them to be obedient even when they feel deeply. You must stop interpreting silence as abandonment. Silence is often God closing one channel so that he can open a louder one. The connection ended so the commission could begin. And this is the truth many are not ready to hear. Some people received everything they were meant to receive from you. Their season in your life ended successfully. They were not meant to stay. They were meant to grow. And they did. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not disqualified. You are in the quiet interval between assignments. Heaven is shifting your environment to match your next level of authority. What feels like loss is actually space. What feels like abandonment is actually recalibration. What feels like silence is actually God changing the frequency of your life. And chosen one, once you understand this, the separation will no longer feel like punishment. It will feel like preparation. The energy shift. Why people feel uncomfortable around who you have become. Chosen. 1. There comes a moment in your growth when people can no longer explain their discomfort around you. They cannot point to anything you did wrong. You have not changed in arrogance. You have not changed in cruelty. You have not changed in pride. Yet something about you now disturbs their spirit. The room gets quieter when you enter. Conversations shift. Eyes avoid. Energy tightens. And you feel it immediately. That is not imagination. That is the energy shift. You see, growth is not just visible in success. It is felt in presence. When your spirit matures, your frequency changes. When your boundaries strengthen, your frequency changes. When your discernment sharpens, your frequency changes. You begin to carry yourself differently without trying. You speak less, but with more weight. You tolerate less, but with more peace. You apologize less, but love more clearly. And people who were comfortable with the old version of you do not always know how to coexist with the new one. Some are uncomfortable because your discipline silently exposes their disorder. You do not have to preach. You do not have to correct. You do not have to confront. Your consistency alone becomes a mirror, and mirrors make people uneasy when they are avoiding reflection. When they see you choosing restraint while they choose excess, choosing growth while they choose comfort, choosing purpose while they choose distraction, something inside them begins to accuse them. But instead of adjusting, many choose distance. Others are uncomfortable because your healing disrupts their control. When you were broken, they could influence you. When you were confused, they could direct you. When you were insecure, they could define you. But now that you see clearly, now that you trust your spirit, now that you no longer ask permission to become who you are, they feel the loss of influence. And loss of influence often disguises itself as irritation. There are also those who are uncomfortable because they benefited from your old wounds. When you overgave, they took. When you over-explained, they dismissed. When you over-compromised, they demanded more. But now that you give with boundaries, explain with clarity, and stand with authority, they feel deprived. Not because you became selfish, but because you became whole. And wholeness does not allow exploitation to survive. Your growth also triggers comparison. Even if you never compete, people will compare themselves to you. They will measure their stagnation against your movement, your stillness against their chaos, your direction against their drifting. And comparison creates discomfort when it reveals an unwillingness to change. Instead of rising with you, some will quietly resent you. They will not say it out loud, but the space between you will speak. You must understand, chosen one, that not everyone is uncomfortable because they are evil. Some are uncomfortable because your transformation forces a decision in them. Either they must grow or they must withdraw. And growth is painful to those addicted to familiarity. So withdrawal feels easier. They create distance not because they hate you, but because they are afraid of becoming who they would need to be to stay connected to you. Another layer of the energy shift is authority. At some point, people stop seeing you as the helper and begin to sense you as the leader. And leadership changes relational dynamics. Familiar jokes stop landing the same. Old access feels inappropriate. Casual disrespect feels dangerous. Not because you became harsh, but because your spirit now carries weight. What once rolled off you now disrupts the atmosphere. People feel that. And some do not like being in rooms where words carry consequences. Your silence now feels louder than your old explanations. Your rest now feels more powerful than your old effort. Your no now feels sharper than your old yes. And people who are comfortable around your exhaustion are often uneasy around your peace. Because your peace has boundaries. It cannot be manipulated. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be guilted. And guilt was once their language with you. Now they cannot speak it fluently anymore. Some also feel uncomfortable because your light exposes what they have been hiding from themselves. Your clarity exposes their confusion. Your obedience exposes their compromise. Your growth exposes their delay. And exposure feels like judgment to those who do not want to repent. So instead of adjusting inwardly, they adjust the relationship outwardly. They create emotional distance so they do not have to deal with internal disruption. Chosen one, there is a version of you that people were addicted to. The version that was always available, always understanding, always giving, always absorbing. And when you evolved beyond that version, they felt the withdrawal. But instead of acknowledging that you grew, they frame it as you changed. As if growth is betrayal, as if boundaries are abandonment, as if healing is arrogance. That is not truth. That is discomfort trying to defend itself. You must also recognize that familiarity can no longer protect people from the authority you now carry. When God covers someone with higher responsibility, He often removes excessive familiarity because familiarity produces contempt, and contempt is dangerous around anointed authority. So God allows tension to rise so that reverence can return. Even if people do not consciously understand it, they feel a need to step back. Another reason people feel uneasy is because your tolerance for chaos has died. You no longer thrive in drama. You no longer bond over dysfunction. You no longer survive through emotional turbulence. You now value peace more than approval. And many relationships were built on chaos bonding. Once you withdraw from that frequency, those relationships lose their glue. And without chaos, there is nothing left to hold them together. Your energy shift also reveals who was connected to you by alignment and who was connected to you by convenience. Alignment remains through change. Convenience disappears when access changes. And many people were connected to your availability, not your destiny. When availability ends, they feel awkward. When access changes, they feel displaced. Some feel uncomfortable because they secretly hoped you would never outgrow their version of you. They liked you dependent. They liked you uncertain. They liked you questioning yourself. Your growth threatens their sense of superiority. And rather than celebrating your rise, they shrink from it, because witnessing your strength forces them to confront their insecurity. This is why some will become quiet without explanation. Others will become critical. Others will become distant. Others will become defensive. The energy shift affects people differently, but the root is the same. Your frequency no longer matches their comfort zone. Chosen one, this discomfort is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is often a sign that you are doing something irreversible. You cannot shrink back into who you were without betraying who you have become. The door behind you closed when you healed. And some people will mourn the version of you they could control, while others will honor the version of you that God is revealing. Understand this with clarity and without fear. You did not lose people because you became cold. You lost people because you became clear. And clarity rearranges rooms without asking permission. Do not apologize for the version of you that required pain to be born. Do not dilute your growth to make others feel comfortable. Do not dim your stability to soothe their chaos. You are not meant to be familiar to everyone anymore. You are meant to be aligned with what God is becoming through you. This is the energy shift. It is uncomfortable for those who refuse to rise. It is liberating for those who are ready to move. And chosen one, you were never meant to stay vibrating at the level of who you used to be. You were designed to ascend. The cost of being a spiritual builder and path opener. Chosen one, there is a price attached to being the one who goes first. Not everyone is called to build paths. Most people walk on paths someone else already cleared, but you were not designed for comfort-first living. You were designed to break through what others avoid, to confront what others ignore, and to establish what others will later enjoy without ever knowing what it took to exist. And that cost is not small. It is paid in silence, in misunderstanding, in delayed recognition, and in emotional weight that few could survive. The spiritual builder is always early. You arrive before support. You move before confirmation. You act before applause. And being early means being alone. People only gather once the structure begins to make sense. But when you are laying foundations, there is dust, confusion, labor, and no visible beauty yet. Most people do not honor foundations. They only admire finished stages. That is why you often feel unseen while working the hardest. You also pay the cost of constant responsibility. When others panic, you stabilize. When others doubt, you stand firm. When others collapse emotionally, you become the emotional pillar. That strength looks admirable from the outside, but it drains quietly on the inside. You carry burdens that were never verbally assigned to you, yet your spirit accepts them because it knows who it is. And over time, being the strong one becomes heavy. Not because you are weak, but because you are human. Another cost is delayed celebration. Many chosen go through seasons where no one is clapping while they are building. You encourage others while no one encourages you. You celebrate others while your own victories pass in silence. You push people forward while standing still yourself. And sometimes you ask in quiet moments, when will it be my turn? But heaven does not work on applause schedules. Heaven works on assignment seasons. And the season of building is rarely the season of being celebrated. You also pay the cost of misinterpretation. When you lead, people project. Some will call you controlling when you are protecting. Some will call you distant when you are discerning. Some will call you harsh when you are simply clear. Not everyone can interpret authority correctly, especially those who benefited from your overgiving before your boundaries formed. And when your posture shifts from pouring to positioning, misinterpretation follows. There is also the cost of being emotionally ahead. As a path opener, you feel shifts before others do. You sense when a season is ending long before it visibly collapses. You feel when a relationship has served its purpose, even while others are still comfortable. This makes you look detached to those who arrive emotionally later than you. You already processed what they are just beginning to feel. And when you move on while they are still catching up, they assume you never cared. But the truth is, you cared earlier and deeper than they could see. Another cost is spiritual warfare that others never notice. When you open paths, resistance rises, not just from people, but from unseen realms. You deal with attacks that do not look dramatic but feel exhausting. Attacks against your focus, against your confidence, against your rest, against your identity. Builders are targeted not because they are weak, but because they are impactful. The enemy does not waste energy on inactive lives. Resistance only rises against movement. You also pay the cost of limited companionship. Not many can walk beside a builder without either trying to compete, copy, control, or criticize. True companionship for the chosen is rare because few have the maturity to appreciate the work without trying to shift the spotlight. And so many chosen walk with acquaintances, but very few with true peers. You know many people, but few know you deeply. And that can be a quiet kind of loneliness that crowds cannot cure. There is also the cost of emotional restraint. As a builder, you often cannot afford to collapse publicly. You cannot always process loudly. You cannot always react freely. You must remain composed when you feel like breaking, because others are watching how you respond to pressure. Your reactions teach even when you are tired of being a lesson, and this restraint trains your spirit but exhausts your emotions. You also pay the cost of delayed reward. You plant seeds that will grow in other people's fields first. You water gardens that will bloom where you may not live long enough to enjoy the shade. And the human part of you wants to taste the fruit now. You want to sit under what you planted. But divine building sometimes requires you to move on before the harvest matures. That does not mean you were cheated. It means you were trusted with a generational role. Another heavy cost is watching others receive credit for what you initiated. You see them speak what you taught, lead what you modeled, stand where you once stood alone, and the world celebrates them without knowing who helped them get there. That silence can sting if you let it. But heaven never loses records. God does not forget who planted the first seed. Public memory is short. Divine memory is eternal. Some of you also pay the cost of emotional misunderstanding from your own family. They see your exhaustion, but not your assignment. They see your distance, but not your burden. They question your pace without understanding your pressure. And because your work is spiritual, not mechanical, it is hard for them to measure. So they interpret what they do not understand. That emotional gap is also part of the price. You must also carry the cost of disappointing people who wanted you to remain smaller. Some preferred you when you were only helpful, not powerful. Only supportive, not positioned. When you rise, they feel left behind, even if you never abandoned them. And instead of adjusting upward, they interpret your growth as rejection. That tension follows builders everywhere. The cost also includes constant recalibration. You cannot live on autopilot. You must always check your motives, your pace, your posture. Builders who stop recalibrating become tyrants or burnouts. So you live in a constant rhythm of building and self-correcting, pushing and praying, leading and listening. That dual responsibility is mentally and spiritually demanding. One of the deepest costs is being rarely understood in the moment. Your obedience often looks foolish until results appear. Your patience looks passive until the timing is revealed. Your silence looks weak until your authority speaks. Builders are always misunderstood at first because vision matures before visibility. Chosen one, you must never interpret this cost as loss. Cost is not punishment. Cost is proof that what you carry is valuable. No one pays heavily for something meaningless. No one invests deeply into something cheap. The cost reflects the weight of the assignment, and this is what many never tell you. Builders do not choose their role. They recognize it. You did not wake up one day and decide to be this strong. Life trained you. Pain shaped you. Pressure refined you. Responsibility found you. And one day you realized you could not live small, even if you tried. You are not paying this cost to be admired. You are paying this cost to build what will outlive you. You are paying this cost so that others can walk where you once crawled. You are paying this cost so that someone else's beginning will be easier than yours was. In the quiet moments when the weight feels heavy, remember this. Foundations are never glamorous, but without them, nothing stands. And chosen one, you are not just building paths, you are becoming one. Why they move on without looking back. Chosen one of the hardest truths you will ever have to face is this. Some people move on without looking back, not because they forgot what you did, but because looking back would require them to face who they used to be. And many are not strong enough to confront their past with honesty. When they look at you, they see the version of themselves that was broken, confused, needy, or lost. And rather than honor the bridge, they choose to erase the memory of the river they once almost drowned in. For many, moving on is not courage, it is avoidance. It is not always strength. Sometimes it is shame dressed as progress. Your presence reminds them of nights they cried, mistakes they made, fears they carried, and battles they barely survived. And instead of seeing your role with gratitude, they feel exposed by it. So they keep walking forward with their head turned away, not because they are healed, but because they are hiding from their own reflection. Another reason they move on without looking back is because their new environment demands a new identity. When people rise into new spaces, they often feel pressured to rewrite their story